This connected trip vision, I absolutely believe it makes a difference. I know it because I feel it because I do it myself. There may be moments of problems, but in the long run, things will get better. People will be wealthier. They'll be able to travel more.
You are listening to STR Global Unlocked, brought to you by AGL Atelier, the show where I speak with the leaders shaping short-term rentals worldwide. I am Simon Lehmann, and after 2 decades buying, selling, advising, and investing, I've built a network that spans continents and categories. This podcast brings that network to you. Real conversations, global insight, no PR fluff. Let's get started. I'm genuinely excited and personally honored to welcome a guest who has been at the heart of travel innovation for over 2 decades. When you think about global travel, it's impossible not to think about Booking.com. And when you think about Booking.com, there is one name that stands out: Glenn Fogel. Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking Holdings, parent company of Booking.com, Priceline, Agoda, Kayak, and many others. In this episode, we'll explore how Booking's transforming beyond its OTA roots towards the connected trip vision, how artificial intelligence is redefining the traveler experience, and how the company continues to adapt to shifting consumer behavior, global growth, and the expanding short-term rental market. Glenn, it's such a pleasure to have you on STR Global Unlocked. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Let's get right started into it. We be mindful of time, of our time, your time, and all our listeners as well. Booking Holdings have evolved from a pure OTA to a broader travel ecosystem. And my first question that I would like to dive in with you is, how do you describe where Booking is today on that journey towards the connected trip?
Well, I think the way to say it is still very early. Well, I'm very pleased with the progress that we made, and we recently did our earnings, and I talked some of the statistics. I was pleased about things like that our connected trip, the number of transactions at Booking.com were up over 20%, and I like the fact that we've now entered where of all of our total transactions at Booking.com, it's now a double-digit number that are connected trip. And I'd like to talk about the number of flights as one vertical in the connected trip that's doing so well, up 32% over the last quarter. And things like attractions, so important for everybody. That up almost 90% in the last quarter. And the quarter before that, it was 100%, doubling the quarter before. So it's growing very rapidly. But the truth is, we are still far from what I really want to achieve for the consumer. And that is providing a way people can do their planning, their inspiration, executing, going through travel in the way that it should be done, that it's easy to do. And if anything goes wrong, because we all know in travel, things go wrong, that things get fixed immediately. And even more so, using all of our technology to be able to see the problems before they happen and fix them before they happen. I mean, there's so many things we can do to make it so much better. So I say, I'm glad with the progress we've made, but I know there's a lot more that can be done and will be done.
Yeah, you and I could fill an episode just on what can go wrong, which we just done before we started recording as well, Glenn, of all the things that I've experienced in STR. Very recently, nearly a lethal situation with my son in an apartment in London, and grinding homeworks in one of the properties I stayed in Australia just 2 weeks ago. So I could not agree with you more. As we know, the key audience of STR Global Unlocked is the short-term rental and vacation rental industry. And I've just recently had the pleasure to moderate the ASTRA conference, the Australian Short-Term Rental Conference in the Gold Coast a week ago in Australia. And one of your colleagues, Todd Lacey, has done a great presentation and shown that short-term rental is the growth engine of Booking.com. Let us dive into that a little bit more, and how do you see STR fitting into the overall lodging product of Booking.com?
Oh, it's incredibly important. And again, the recent call, we talked about how we are now up to 8.6 million listings in all alternative accommodation, our short-term rentals. And the fact that what I love is the fact that it's growing rapidly. We grew 10% in terms of the room nights. You know, it now comprises at Booking.com 36% of our overall room nights are now in the STR area. And that's really good. In fact, when you look at the total numbers, we're not the leader in terms of the total number of room nights served for that industry. But when you look at the leaders' numbers, you look at our numbers, we're up to about 3/4 of their numbers. So we're not even, but we're getting there. We're making progress. We're growing faster. And we've been growing faster in the short-term rentals than our standard hotel accommodations for a very long time. So I'm very pleased with the growth we're doing, and I'm really pleased with the relationships with our partners. That's the most important thing.
So, let's look at that on the geographical side a little bit stronger. For me being a native, or let's say born European, I can say I've grown up with Booking.com. But let's put the lens a little bit more into Asia and the United States. You've tried several attempts also in the US, and Asia is becoming a growth market for you now. How does that disperse now when you look at your overall growth within the category?
No, you're absolutely right. And in Europe, I think we are pretty equivalent in terms of our total numbers versus any other competitor in the marketplace. But you're also correct that, say, the U.S., we are far behind the leader there in terms of the number of listings, in terms of the amount of business we do there. And it is something that we have been devoting a lot of time, energy, effort, and we have seen some recent good growth there. I'm very pleased with that, but I know there's a lot more to be done. Certainly the fact that we started late, that's something you got to fight against. There's already incredible brand awareness for our biggest competitors there, so you got to fight that. Then on top of that, I'll be blatantly, I'll just say brutally honest. Our product was not as good as other people's in the U.S. And we really need to make some changes there. And we are and have been doing that. We're continuing to improve upon that. But that's something so critical, is to develop that relationship, come up with a way to present those properties the way they should be presented, offering the same types of services to the property managers, to the owners, in a way they want it, so that they then want to list on our platform. That's what we have to do. And then on the other side, we got to get the travelers to know that, hey, you can come to us and you can get a great STR anywhere in the U.S., the same as you can do with anyone else. But that takes work, takes money, takes effort, and we're doing all those things. It's just going to take time to become equivalent.
Yeah, I remember that so well, and without blowing smoke, Glenn, but when we had the STR Legends event in Phoenix and you jumped on a call with us, and we were like, a handful of experts in one room, and you took an hour to listen to us. I think it was a pretty brutal call, but, you've come a long way from these conversations as well.
But that's what the important thing is. You got to listen to the customer. We have two kinds of customers. Everybody in the world knows, your customer's a traveler. Sure, that's one type of customer. The other customer is the person who is trying to fill up that space and wants to get paid, wants to get money out of it. It's a business. It's not a hobby. It's a business. And so we understand that. We got to take care of both sides of the marketplace, both customers.
So let me focus a little bit more on Asia. We like, Asia is a different market in its own right, also in terms of what kind of demand, what kind of product it provides, etc. One thing we found very interesting, we had the general manager of Australian tourism presenting the inbound numbers of Australia and seeing this massive growth out of Asia. And I want to talk about the category now, Glenn, right? So traditionally, when I look at Europe, you have the traditional Asian, let's call it Japanese, Chinese, whoever come to Europe, they do Europe in 7 days. These days are over, right? They've matured. They've understood the different categories. They understood the cultural differences. They want to come back again. They want to travel different. What is your analysis within Booking, and how do you look? Because you sort of named Asia as your long-term growth market as it matures as well.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And certainly look at the demographics. One of the reasons Asia is a long-term growth opportunity for anybody in the travel business is because it's a younger population. That population is growing faster. GDP is growing faster. And as we all know, when people go from a lower income level, when they finally reach that level of income where they can afford to travel, what's the first thing they want to do? Travel. Which is great. And that's all tailwinds for all of us there. But you got to do it right. And you have to certainly localize. You have to recognize that somebody who's coming from one part of the world may be expecting different things in terms of where they're going. And you want to try to meet them so that they want to come to your system versus somebody else's. in that if you're a property owner, you want to say, do I need to make some changes to my property in a way that will appeal to different Asia travelers? And then the way they actually are booking, we ourselves as the platform, are we doing things the way they expect and want it to be? So those are things we all want to think about when we're trying to make sure that we capture part of this very exciting growth area.
How do you communicate to your product partners? That's such an interesting point you've just raised. I've just recently had a consulting mandate where we talked about how do we capture that growth with different guests, like have a rice cooker in your property, have like different amenities that you just need for a different type of cultural background, multi-language conversation, especially within the property. If everything is in English, it makes it super hard and they can't communicate. So what is the role that booking sort of plays in with your providers, with your partners for accommodation, specifically for STR, and how we can improve that and how do you engage into that conversation?
Yeah, and that is absolutely right. So for us, the critical part for us is less so in helping to talk about how can you make your property more appealing to a traveler from a different region. We can do somewhat and give some hints and some ideas and thoughts and that. But really the other part you're talking about where we shine is making sure that we bring that guest to you from a place where you'd have a hard time marketing to get that person, one, two, then being able to do the interface, the payments part, which can be very hard, different place where you come to you, and then the communications in terms of issues, et cetera. Your mention of multilingual is very important because, we do over 40 languages, and being able to do it throughout, having a messaging platform that will enable a guest to be able to communicate with the owner or manager of a property in different languages. And now we're able to do it with AI almost simultaneous, and will be simultaneous. These are the type of things that we're doing to make sure that somebody doesn't feel, well, I can't get a traveler from Vietnam. I can't get a traveler from Thailand. I can't get one from Malaysia. No, we want to make it so you can get a traveler from any part of the world and make sure they enjoy it. Now, I'm not going to be, though, spending a lot of time saying, the color you have in your property, well, in certain cultures, that color actually is not a good color because it doesn't mean what you think it means. It means something else. You should change it. I'm not going to tell them that. Okay? That is only the property manager to deal with painting the walls.
Yeah, you already alluded to the next point that I wanted to raise in terms of FinTech. FinTech and payment solutions is extremely important. And what role do you see these services playing in improving both the travel and the partner experience going forward from a Booking.com standpoint?
It is so important. Let's start with the basics, just the basics. How are you going to get the money from the traveler to the property owner and there are a lot of steps. Now, if you have a traveler who only does their payments in a certain way, and you have an owner who says, I don't know how to take money that way. I don't know, WeChat Pay, Alipay, M-Pesa. I mean, I can go through so many for them, right? We do that for them. We will take that money in the form, the way the traveler wants to pay, and then we'll put the money to the owner in the way they want it. They say, could you please deposit Australian dollars into my bank account? We can do that. So that's the idea, is doing that. So it's cheaper, it's frictionless, it's easier. So nobody says, I'm not going to stay at that property because they don't allow me how I want to pay. We want to make that totally frictionless and good. Next thing is reducing cancellations. Then also we want to make sure watching out for fraud, doing all those things to watch out for those things for the owner, because the traveler is going to deal with us with the money. We will do a better job because of our scale, our expertise, all the technology we do. We can do that better for the owner manager. That type of thing is really our job. Our job really is to make it easier for an owner to be able to do their business in a way that's cheaper than if they did it on their own. And that in the FinTech area is huge. Things like start coming up with things like, well, how should the cancellation? Should we provide travel insurance and make things easier on them on that? That's another way to do it. Again, lots of things coming down the pike. Obviously, things because of foreign exchange changes, providing some type of way that somebody on the traveler side doesn't have to worry about that changes in the currency value. That's another thing we're providing there, and making sure that the owner also, they want to get paid in their local currency. They really don't care about foreign exchange. So that's one of the things that we're working on. I think we're making good progress on it.
One thing I want to allude on or talk to you quickly about is sort of the overall brand strategy. We talked a lot about Asia. We talked about FinTech and what role is Booking.com playing with its product and their partners. At the same time, you still run multi-brand strategies also in terms of Asia. What can we expect going forward? And is that still a strategy that you guys are looking at?
Absolutely. In fact, it's working very, very well. Let's take Asia for a second. So we have our Agoda brand. Agoda is the legal headquarters. It has a big office in Singapore. There's a bigger number of people in Bangkok and people throughout Asia working in different big cities, etc. They have done a fantastic job of making the brand aware. Brand awareness is way up in Asia, and even more so, localization. So when somebody's going to the Agoda site in, let's say, Vietnam, it is localized for the Vietnamese booker community. If somebody goes to some other part, whether it be in India, whether it be in Japan, wherever, it is localization. Now, that is really great. On the other hand, we have Booking, also very big in Asia, but they also bring a lot of people from around the world. As you talked about,
Sure.
Booking, it's so big in Europe. Lots of Europeans want to go to Asia. This is they're familiar with Booking. They go to Booking, and we provide them with lots of different places to stay in Asia. So another thing we can do, along with also providing ways for people in Asia who like a Booking brand. It's a global brand. It's a well-known brand. Some people want to go there instead of Agoda. It's a way that we can try and capture all different segments of the marketplace. So it's very powerful. And so far, it's working very well, which is shown by the growth that we've been achieving.
Glenn, you and I wouldn't have a conversation if we wouldn't talk about a timely conversation, if we wouldn't talk about AI as well. It was interesting at several conferences that I've just been attending to. We're sort of trying to be a bit thought-provoking. And I've had a lot of different interviews on the podcast as well. And distribution is definitely highlighted as one of the biggest challenges for all of the product partners going forward, direct bookings through the OTAs, keep that a little bit more general. And then my argument of myself having 5 children, their search behavior is fundamentally changing, if we call it that, right? So we have different interfaces, and obviously one is ChatGPT. And I did a sort of a survey at the conference in Australia to say, hey, and a very general question that they could vote online or through the mobile. I said, are the OTAs going to survive the next 5 years? And a lot of people said, no, it's going to change dramatically. Now, Booking has made significant efforts as well. So I want to be a bit thought-provoking here and saying, and maybe you can highlight that conversation a little bit more to think about if people say, well, I'll find my property on ChatGPT, I'm not going to use an OTA, but that statement in itself is obviously not correct. And you have been one of the partners very early days with OpenAI to test and work on different models. Can you allude a little bit more and see how you view the changing behavior in search and how people will look for travel in the future, and how does that work with ChatGPT yourself?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and we certainly have heard a lot of what you're just talking about. What would have been fascinating is if, say, 25 years ago, you had asked a group of people the same question, very similar, say, so will these OTAs exist in 2000? Or will everybody just go, directly to the properties once they get websites onto the internet? And then like a few years later, you could have said, okay, but now there's the mobile thing. Do you think that the OTAs will survive? Because now they're going to be these mobile apps, and it would just go to like a Marriott app. And then you could say, let's go some more time. And, well, there's all this AI stuff happening.
And then there was the voice interface, Glenn.
Exactly. And now we're here, and I'm amused. You and I, we are mature enough. Let's use that word. Let's not say we're old. Let's say we're mature enough that we've been through these cycles and we've seen this. But there's nothing wrong with asking that question. It's a very legitimate question. And if you don't change, as technology changes, you will be left behind. You will disappear. So we are always aware of that, and that is why we are working closely with people like OpenAI and their ChatGPT product, while working closely with people like Perplexity, like Gemini. A lot of people, all of a sudden say, oh, wait, Gemini is great. Now we're working with Google and their Gemini product, along with other things like we work with Salesforce and their AI actions, and Amazon with Alexa. So we are working with everybody, because nobody really knows what's the future going to be and how are people going to interact with these new ways to get information. I mean, that's been going on for travel forever. I mean, if we go all the way back to the start of the modern travel era, maybe back to Thomas Cook in the 1800s. And of course, one of the things he was doing was putting together train schedules and then combining that with hotels and getting people to take trips to London to go see shows there, etc. Well, people always feel they need information. This is just a new way to get information. And then they want to act on that information. And now we have potentially new ways to people, instead of them having to do the action, AI can do something agentic, i.e. taking the action for you. Nobody knows exactly how this is going to play or not. We ourselves creating our own large language model actions. We ourselves working with others' models and fine-tuning. We ourselves, look, we got AI trip planner for Booking.com. We have Penny as an AI product for Priceline. We have things working with Kayak.ai for Kayak. So there's lots of interesting ways this is going to come down. And then the biggest thing is, how does the monetization work? How does someone like a ChatGPT get paid in the future? So somebody goes to ChatGPT and says, I need a property in Paris. I have 3 kids. I like to have an apartment in there, and I want to be near Notre Dame, and I'm near a metro, and I want a free breakfast bar. They type that all in. I mean, what happens next? Well, ChatGPT comes back with some answers and some things. Well, which ones does it choose? And then what happens to somebody? If somebody just goes directly to a property, well, how are they going to get there? Is there an actual site to go to or not? Or do they go to us, Booking.com? And then ChatGPT, how are they going to get paid? Are we going to pay them? Is it going to be a bidding model like on old search model? Nobody knows any of this.
We just can't know yet. Yeah.
We don't know. But what I do know is the critical thing that has lasted for well over 100 years in terms of travel as an industry is making sure you provide great service to your travelers and to your partners. And a lot of the partners, sure, big partner like a Marriott or a Hilton or any of the big international chains, they have a lot of sophisticated people. They can do a lot of interesting stuff. But the bulk of properties around the world are not these giant multi-billion-dollar intercontinental. Yeah, it's not them. It's the smaller players. They don't have the technology. They're using them, So how you plan to connect your database to ChatGPT?
Yeah,
they exactly. Huh? What? No, we do that for them. The same way nobody makes their own electricity, right? You buy your electricity. You'll buy your connectivity. And for us right now, the way they buy it is through a commission-based model, so they don't have any risk. They only have to pay if somebody shows up in their property. It's a pretty good deal.
So let's talk a little bit about progression as well. And by the way, you don't want to be next to the Louvre. You want to be next to the Louvre because you want to steal some jewels as well.
No, I hear actually they've been caught, and I may not have been the smartest of plans by these people.
So it didn't go too well. They didn't book with Booking.com next to.
I don't know. Who knows? They lived in the area.
So just looking at your recent announcement in terms of your quarterly results, your CFO mentioned that you're already seeing faster search, better conversion, and lower cancellation from AI-driven experience. Can you elaborate a little bit more what that means for the audience as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That may have been a little misconstrued a little bit, the way it was said. So I believe Ava, our CFO, I believe at that point of the conversation, he was talking more about the AI things we have within our actual inside. But I don't doubt that too. When somebody does come to us from a lead from a ChatGPT or one of those, we're very pleased, obviously, to be able to convert that into actually a purchase. And again, nobody knows how this will play out, but certainly if somebody's able to get more information, more details in terms of where they want, what they want, it makes sense that then when they actually go to book, they're actually ready to book and they book. that's why it's so important for us creating these things like our AI trip planner. And one of the great things we have, for example, is working really well. And this was, I think, one of the things that Ada was talking about is we now have natural language search capabilities. So in the past, you want to go and you would use a check on a box. I want a gym. I want a free breakfast. And then we give us search results based on what you had clicked in the search boxes. Now, instead of that, you just type into it box. You just, I would like, free breakfast. I would like a gym. And then it does even better, coming back with exactly what you want. That's one of the benefits of AI and natural language search is it just provides a better result, which results in higher conversion and lower cancellation.
Without a doubt. So let's get onto that in a second as well. Internally, right? So that's equally important instead of just consumer or guest facing, traveler facing innovation, what AI is concerned. What does that mean for Booking.com? And, in all fairness, I read all your posts, and I've just seen one recently that you've been interviewed from a leadership coach as well, which I thought was super interesting podcast as well that I was listening to. And then you always get these individuals who then use this opportunity to comment and say, the customer service at Booking sucks and it's not happening and this and that. Everybody uses an opportunity to jump into something like that as well, right? So, and you're used to that for a CEO of a very large public company, but at the same time, how does that transform this whole conversation on AI within Booking.com, internal processes, and how do you look at that?
Yeah. So, and thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk about this. So, one of the unfortunate things of being CEO of a very large company is that you really do feel it, and I feel it very personally, when you don't meet up with your expectations that you expect for your entire organization. And when something goes wrong and a customer reaches out directly, whether they send an email or they post something in a pod, anywhere, and you see and I feel personally, I feel terrible about it. I feel, oh my Lord, how do we fix this? Because it really is, you just feel bad because that person. Now, one of the great things about AI, though, is that it's making things better. So one of the things people have always complained about, no matter what the service is the amount of time it takes to deal with customer service. You're a customer, you need to get something fixed, and you are waiting forever, whether you've called somebody or you sent something by a text message or whatever, and you're waiting for something to come back. The great thing about AI is that it can come back with answers much faster. Because, for example, you call a customer service person, well, a human being can take a long time. The human being could be in a bad mood. The human being may just not know the answer. The AI knows the answer much faster. It's able to respond much faster. And even more so, it never has a bad day. It never had an argument with its spouse in the morning before it came to work and now it's in a bad mood. Never. And you can yell at an AI bot all you want. It will not take offense. It doesn't get offended. It responds just as it did before, very pleasantly, nicely, and tries to fix it. So these are really great. And then all the language stuff is great. So that's something that is really great because it's improving the service for the traveler. In addition, it's making it better for the partner. So sometimes partners want to handle some of the customers or have to deal with answers. You're reaching out to the manager and you say, do you have all the utensils I need to make a paella in my apartment? And they come back with, but now with AI and stuff, we're providing smart response and auto response and making it so much easier. They don't have to do a thing. We do it so that can get responded automatically. The property manager has to spend less time answering things and knows that it'll be answered correctly. And that's really, really powerful. So that's one of the so there's so many things that can be done in the customer service that it will be so much better. And even more so, you start being proactive, solving an issue that could be beforehand. An example I give all the time, this isn't really a customer service thing. This is something that would become a customer service thing, perhaps. Yeah. So, and this is the example is when people go to let's say Amsterdam, they usually want to do at least two things. One, they want to go to the Rijksmuseum, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful paintings and all sorts of art. Another thing they want to do is a canal trip. Now, museums, you should see those on the rainy day. And the canal boat, you should see on the sunny day. Now, somebody says, in our connected trip, and they got, let's say the Thursday is the canal trip and the Wednesday is the museum and it's Monday. Well, we should be able to look ourselves. We should know what the weather's going to be. They should too, but we're looking. We should know if it's going to rain on the canal day. We should switch it around and be proactive. So instead of the customer on the day it starts, on the morning, on the rain, they go, oh, it's raining. Can we change this? We should have done this 2 days beforehand and switched it around. That's the thing. I want AI
being proactive instead of responsive. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you gave me so many other leeways or segues. I would love to talk about it. First of all, I had my own experience. I'm being honest here now on my podcast. I booked a trip from VRMA Vegas to Australia. One thing I didn't realize, I booked my rental car the day after, but actually I only arrived 2 days after because I was traveling from behind the world and I lost 1 day. So I booked through booking.com my rental car, and then I used the agent and said, guys, I got my dates mixed up. I'm actually only arriving on the 15th instead of the 14th because I'm losing a day traveling through the date change. And that was a breeze. So that can happen to what you exactly say.
But we should have known that before. See, that's part of that's what we want AI. And that's what AI should see. Wait, there's a problem in this. He has booked a flight. He doesn't actually arrive until the day. He set the car reservation the day, but he's not going to be. And so our AI should have.
He said, Simon, you arrived a day later.
Don't do that. I have examples like that too. And just to give you examples of this, and I mean, and this is a simple thing, but it's something that I knew right away. The person in my family who was doing the booking did not think about this, but I'll be very brief on this, is that we were going from our home outside New York to the Galapagos. So it was really important that the timings hit right, so we hit the right boat. And we are leaving in the morning, and there are 3 major airports in New York. And there had to be a connection. And my wife, for whatever, I can't wait. My wife chose, for whatever reason, the one that was farthest away. First off, that was a problem. But even worse is the connection did not have a lot of leeway. There wasn't a lot of time. And I'm like, oh my Lord, that's going to be so tight. And if we have any delay in takeoff, we're not going to make that connection. And I was really stressed about all this, okay? Now, that's something that AI should have pointed out. Yes, it's a legal connection. It's a legal connection.
Of course,
But you don't want to have to miss that thing. So you should.
Data would show you how many late departures you had on that flight.
Exactly.
5 years.
Exactly. It said you have an 80% chance you are not getting to the Galapagos.
Yeah, that's so funny. But that makes you human, Glenn. I'm glad you can share this story as well. We all travel, we make our experience, but you are totally right. But for me, the bigger question in this, and I want to sort of go back a little bit to the big conversation within STR, is where does that leave the human capital? And is Glenn Fogel going to be a lonely CEO because he can run his business on his own? And before I get there, I want to talk about it because in short-term rental, we all agree that the single most important asset that short-term rental has is still trust, because we have homeowners who trust the professional managers to do the best for their property, right? And that's a personal relationship. And in the big conversation of AI, that's obviously a huge issue. You know, how is it deployed responsibly? Can we get rid of all our staff? The human interaction, the human capital is not that important anymore, and especially in travel. And I think that's one of the reasons that you and I have probably personally in common. We love to deal with people, right? Where is that balance in your view?
Well, it's going to be a big problem for society, and I worry about this a great deal, and I don't think our government leaders are spending enough time really thinking, how are we going to deal with this? And look, there have been a lot of technological changes over, a couple hundred years in which there has been displacement of workers. And if we go back to the UK, it was a long time ago, the whole idea of Luddites and where that term comes from, because the automation of weaving came in with machinery and the people losing their job. Or so many other areas around the world we've seen dislocation of people. But many of those dislocations took a long time, decades, some of them. Whereas now with all this new technology, it's changing so rapidly, we can have this dislocation much, much faster in what's going to happen. So let's get out of our business, our industry. Let's go to ground transportation with, let's say, taxi drivers. Well, we had taxi drivers, and they have things like Uber, and that caused disruption or whatever. But if you rode a car, if you were a driver, you could switch from a cab to an Uber driver. It wasn't that big of an issue. You could do that.
No.
Now with automation, if you end up with all of these cabs now being done without a driver through things like Waymo and all these other automated things, what happens to them? And then go on to truck driving. Now, truck driving is a big business. A lot of people get good jobs out of driving a truck, loading cargo. That also is completely becoming automated. So in the U.S., for example, I know the stats there, about 3 million people drive a truck for a living who are part of a union operation and stuff. What's going to happen to them if all these trucks are automated, and how are we going to reorient our society so that those people are not left without anything, any job? And that's an issue. Now, in the travel business, for us, obviously, customer service is probably the biggest issue that is subject to this. Now, it will happen over time, and there are always, I believe, going to be needs for humans. Well, is an upscaling of the job, and what we need to do is provide training and stuff so people can find the next opportunities. But this is not any individual company's true responsibility. The true responsibility,
No, of course,
is the government leaders.
Yeah, I see that too. And these truck drivers from the US, they come to Europe because the law will take forever to have autonomous driving in Europe. So. But, I get your point. And it was interesting last year, the biggest.
By the way, they won't be able to do that because there'll be laws in Europe that don't allow non-European people to drive the truck. Just saying.
All right. We'll move away from the White House and all the other governments. So we can. But yeah, let's talk about trends. So that's an interesting segue. And I totally agree with you. I mean, this is as big as it gets, and we need to strongly think about it. How is that going to affect us? And that really is challenging for all our leaders, and also from a political standpoint, without a doubt. But let's talk about consumer behavior and market trends. I mean, we've seen a lot, Glenn, since COVID, what has come about. And again, I want to sort of focus a little bit more on the traveler expectations, the shift overall, what you see within the lodging industry and predominantly the short-term rental industry, and how do you see some of these behaviors becoming more permanent? One thing that I found interesting that Todd Lacey showed us as a graph in Australia, which I'm not going to dispute. I use different numbers, but it was a good number to say, hey, still 40% of consumer haven't used STR yet. I was at 80 post-COVID, but Booking.com must have better data on that. But where do you see the overall permanent changes in terms of travel behaviors post-COVID that we need to deal with in the future?
Yeah, look, I think it's just wonderful. The growth of the STR industry has just opened up opportunities for travel that were not there before. It's really made it so much better, affordable, and easy to get what you really needed for that particular trip. I think it's just wonderful. Now, we all recognize, though, while it has opened it up tremendously, and there's more travel than ever, and certainly STRs is part among many, part of the reason there's more travel, which is great. We also all recognize there are also some downsides to more travel, and particularly some trouble to the STR industry. So we need to have all the stakeholders together coming up with what is the right way we should regulate and do the STR industry. Look, I totally understand that if I own a flat in a building and on my floor, there's somebody who is renting out their property, and every night I'm hearing the roller, thing going back and forth, the tourists come in, or maybe they're young people enjoying life late, let's say, in places that they get to drink a lot, and they come back and they're loud and banging around a lot. I get somebody say, hey, this isn't good for my life, mine and the neighborhoods, etc. But on the other hand, there are people who work there in that neighborhood, and so who are getting more business. That's good for them. And then the person who owns the property and is renting it out, maybe they really need that income to be able to afford to stay there, etc. So there are a lot of mixed things about this. And the only thing we can say is we need to come together. All the stakeholders, the owner, property owners and managers, the people who are the neighborhood leaders, the governments, everybody get together, come up with what are the optimal solutions. And there can be good compromises so everybody ends up well and better off, and not one group is suffering the full burden and not one side is getting the full benefits. And if we do it right, I'd see it's good for everybody and certainly good for the world, because more travel is good for the world.
What role does booking play in that? I think you came up with a very important point that we're discussing at top of agenda wherever we are in terms of conferences and everything else. And regulation is definitely a huge issue. Again, we can't just generalize it. It depends on regions, destination, property type, et cetera, et cetera. So we get all that, right? But we would see a regulation as a whole, one of the single biggest threats to the short-term rental industry. And one thing you alluded to already is, and that's something that I'm complaining about and talk a lot about, is we are not very good in communicating what the value proposition of a short-term rental really is. What does it do to the community? You know, how much GDP does it actually produce next to a hotel, where I would argue as a short-term rental enthusiast to say, hey, we're creating more per night because the guest consumes totally different than a hotel guest. But what role can sort of booking play? And I go back a long time. I remember the first lobbying conversations with this company out of San Francisco back in 2012 in Paris, when they started to talk about caps and to putting 120-day caps in, because I believe very strongly is that this topic is being politically used for potential votes, but ultimately it does not fight the affordable living within a destination, and it doesn't improve it. But I would love to hear your view, Glenn, on what position does a booking take, and where can you support us also as an industry?
Yeah, no, Simon, I'm shocked to hear that there's politics involved in it. Hard to believe. Look, here's what I think is that we at Booking are trying to do everything we can to promote what is the truth. Make sure that regulators and people in the industry, everybody is talking about the same facts. And as you point out, people tilt the facts and they take the parts they want to get their point of view because what they want. Everybody's got their own stake. Look, we know that short-term rentals helps improve the GDP of the area. That is a fact, and we get all the economics to come in and show those numbers. That's true. Then, of course, we also know there's always more costs when there are more people, so there are costs involved too, and you need to look at that. We also understand that there's certain externalities, that there's a cost, but who's supposed to pay for this cost? Where should it be? And so this is a very complex thing. So my role as CEO of this company and our public affairs group of people in our company is to work together with our people in government, with our industry partners, to present what is really something that is good for society and what really is optimal and stuff. And we recognize, look, we understand and do not want any particular region to be overrun so it is no longer livable. And so nobody would want that. That's not good. And it's not good for the long term in terms of providing a good place to visit. Look, you don't want to visit a place that is so overrun and so crowded and so it's bad. So we need to come up with the right smart regulations that enable the optimal resolution. As you point out, it's different for different places, different regions, even just different local areas within a city. And we also know that it really matters differently what type of property. There's a different type of burden for somebody who is operating a very large STR operation and can afford things versus a single property owner that only rents out, let's say, 1 month a year. And we need to adjust for the different areas. In addition, we need to treat the businesses on the same way. Is that just because your business is from another country or because your business is you got to treat people equally, fairly.
Yeah, I would put my vote out today that, banning short-term rental in Barcelona is not going to fix what the politicians are trying to fix with getting rid of 9,500 apartments, which are a blip in the ocean of total available accommodation within the city. So, and at the end of the day, this will vary across the globe, and we'll see these regulations coming and going because people also realize that they will harm their destination or their economy or things like that. But it doesn't necessarily make living more affordable for these people that are working.
And what's interesting though is what it does show though is that there is a problem. Now the solution they're coming up is not going to solve the problem, but it does recognize there is a problem to be solved. Unfortunately, it pinpoints something that is easier to focus on versus more intractable problems. So, that's part of the issue is that, well, we can't really fix what those problems are. So let's blame it over here because at least there we can do something.
Well, we will do everything we can in partnership with companies like yours to make sure that we're being perceived as a professional industry. We're doing the right thing, delivering solid and continued guest experience and making sure that short-term rental is recognized, one of the most respected travel vertical. Little story from my background when I met Brian Sharples more than 12 years ago. Actually more. It's even...
It's a lot more than that.
It's 20 years ago. When I met Brian Sharples the first time ever, I asked him, what's your vision? And he said to me, I want to make short-term rental the most respectable travel vertical in the world. And he's come a long way. We're not there yet. So we still continue working on that vision as well. And as you alluded earlier, our dear belated friend, Philip Wolf, has asked a lot of the right questions to see how the online travel develops. And I think you raised some very interesting points. And even Glenn Fogel doesn't have all the answers. And I like that in terms of what you said, as we talked about what the internet is going to do to travel. And then what is voice going to do to travel? And what are the OTAs going to do to travel? And we've come all these ways. We've debated and had endless Focusrite conferences. And now we've seen a bigger disruptor than ever coming our way. And your answer is the same. We still don't know how this is going to unravel. We have to be part of it. And I think that's a message to all the smaller and small companies, property managers who are out there. Go and embrace it and use it for the best possible way you can. The human capital remains an important asset in our industry, but we need to use technology. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. Glenn, I could speak to you a lot longer. It's been very insightful. I want to thank you for your time. Before we wrap this up, a few questions looking into the crystal ball of Glenn Fogel going forward. If you look 5 years ahead, how will travelers plan and book trips differently, and how will booking evolve within them?
Well, I think that my crystal ball is cloudier than ever. It's a cloudy ball. It's hard to see that far in the future. But a couple of things I do know, and these are just basics. One, we know that in the long run, more people will want to travel, and travel themselves will want to travel more. As long as our world GDP continues to increase in the long run, which I believe in the long run and will, there may be moments of problems, but in the long run, things will get better. People will be wealthier. They'll be able to travel more. They will travel more. How they're going to do it, nobody knows, but I do believe it's going to continue to be easier. I believe technology will make it easier, that you and I will not have the frustrations that we still have, as you pointed out, your problem, my problem, and all the people that we deal with. You can't meet a person who doesn't have a travel nightmare story to talk about. Hopefully through technology, we'll be able to eliminate a lot of those, which I really believe we will be able to, and we'll make it a more enjoyable planning, executing, and that will be great because, as I said, you said at the very beginning, our motto is we want to make it easier for everybody to experience the world. And together, working together with technology, with everybody in the short-term rental industry, make it more affordable, make it easier, make sure they're getting the type of property, accommodation that really fits their needs for that specific trip. I think together we'll be able to achieve great things.
What makes you most excited about the next chapter of Booking Holdings when that snow may lift?
this connected trip vision, I absolutely believe it makes a difference. I know it because I feel it, because I do it myself, and I need that connected trip to solve these problems faster, easier, and prevent them from happening in the first place. And it gives incredible opportunities for our partners to be able to get incremental demand, because when we have the whole connected trip there are incredible different ways that we can work with our partners to provide them an opportunity to make sure that they can get that business.
Considering the fact you're speaking to a global STR audience, what would be the single biggest and most determined advice you can provide to a property manager out there, what they need to do with their business going forward?
I think this is a universal, and it's nothing that is remarkably innovative. It's something everybody knows. Is provide the service a little bit better than the traveler thought it was going to be. Just outperform by just a little bit, and it'll make a huge difference. Because you fall short of that, people know that, and people are going to make their complaint, and they're going to, you got a problem. But if you can do just a little bit better than they expected it, so it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a 5-star. You just have to do better than they expected it to be. And that will do wonders for your business.
You have to be better in what you expect it to be. That was an incredible discussion. A huge thank you to Glenn Fogel for joining me today and sharing his perspective on how Booking Holdings is shaping the future of travel, technology, and hospitality. It's always inspiring to hear from someone who is not only steering one of the world's largest travel companies, but also deeply involved in transforming how we all experience travel, from AI innovation to the rise of short-term rentals and connected trip. Thank you very much, Glenn.
Thank you, Simon.
That was STR Global Unlocked, where we say what others won't. If you got value from today's episode, send it to someone who is still playing it safe. Follow the show and get more global insight at ajlatelier.com. The globally recognized STR consultancy I founded and that proudly brings to you this show. More bold conversations are on the way, so stay tuned.